Welcome to the Rise to the Challenge podcast. Joining me today, he's a life and fitness coach and entrepreneur. It's Craig Moreau. How are you doing today, Craig?
Good. How you doing, Alex?
Doing good. We're so excited to have you on to talk about your Rise to the Challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
So I was born in Methuen, Massachusetts. We lived there till I was about 8, and then we moved to New Hampshire. Um, I was just really into sports. I was a natural athlete. Um, I just excelled at everything that I did, and that was like really my passion. Growing up was always sports related. Soccer, basketball, baseball. As I got older, it was more basketball and football, but basketball took the cake. I played that year round.
Sometimes as kids, when we're growing up, we're always idolizing a certain athlete. For you, what athlete were you idolizing, or something about them kind of sparked interest? Like, I want to be like them because of certain things.
I would have to say Allen Iverson for sure, because I didn't get I'm like 6'2" now, but I didn't start growing till like middle of my sophomore year. I was always like really small, but I was very quick. I kind of like mimicked his crossover, and he always beat the defender on the first step. So I kind of did that. And plus like the tenacity that he played with on the court was just like, being so undersized, and I mean, he was 6 feet, but in the NBA, that's small, you know what I mean? And just the way that he battled every night on the court was just something that I admired and looked up to heavily.
With height being such a controversial topic with basketball, did that ever play an effect both physically and mentally for you? Like, I'm not at the height that I should be because of what basketball players are usually at, but you kind of use that to your advantage in different ways.
Yeah, so I never really looked at it as a disadvantage because mimicking somebody like Allen Iverson who never let it stop him. I was able to, make the most of. I kind of amplify the other areas that I was strong in, like my dribble, court vision, and stuff like that. So I never really let it affect me, and I never really looked at it like a disadvantage.
I usually did that same way as I always called myself the wild card because people look at me and they're like, oh, you're not an athlete, but pick me last, you're going to regret it, or get
Yeah,
on the court or field and you're going to regret that decision.
that's it.
It's like a hidden secret that I always have,
Yeah.
a wild card. Did you ever think about going like pro or really excelling at a professional level or club teams, select teams, private teams for sports?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I definitely wanted to play at least into college. And it just wasn't in the cards for me. I started getting in trouble. My best friend was killed in a car accident my junior year. And before that, like my parents split when I was 8. It was like 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not really sure. It was very shortly after moving into the new house. And back then, they always try and I mean, they did the right thing. Everybody did the right thing as far as like letting me know like this is going to be a big transition. This is going to be hard. This is going to, giving you all the, you know, ins and outs of like what you're going to be dealing with.
Mhm.
But in doing that, I wasn't aware, obviously, because I was 8. But looking back after the transformation I've had, I just wasn't aware that I had the ability to not let it define me. Because I feel like a lot of times with trauma and experiences, we tend to like identify with that. So like I use that as a crutch, like for as long as I can remember, like, well, I came from a broken home and oh, my parents split when I was 8 and it wasn't easy for me. And it was just like a victim mindset because I just wasn't aware that you can have it you can let it define you, or you can, rise above it and overcome. And I didn't end up doing that until like I was almost 30. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago that I started like framing it like that, and being like, all right, listen, like this can't, because after the road that my life went on and the trajectory that it took, I was just a very angry person. My father and I weren't emotionally connected after they split up. He was still involved, like he wasn't like absent, but I always felt like he was absent, and he always felt like, um, we just didn't have that emotional connection for so long. So that really had an impact on me emotionally. And then my mother struggled with relationships and abusive relationships, so we were around that, and that was tough. And then I started dating, and I was mimicking the toxic relationships that I had been around, unknowingly. And yeah, it was just a constant battle of trying to like figure out who I was and why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And then once my friend passed away, that's kind of when I spiraled out of control. And I had always been the like designated driver because I was always the jock, and I never really touched the drugs and the alcohol. I have a lot of alcoholics in my family, so I see like the result of that. So that kind of kept me on the right path for the most part. Plus, like I kind of used that to like feed my ego. You know what I mean? Because I always had like a very, very large ego from, I feel like it was just like the emotional baggage that I was carrying. I just had this lens of the world that like I was terminally unique, like nobody had the problems I had, and nobody feels how I feel. And that's what kept me stuck for so long. But I used to let the fact that I was at parties and not drinking, I would kind of like use that as like a confidence boost. Like, oh, look at me, I can be here, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I was always around. Like my friends were using drugs, and that was when like the OxyContin craze was around. Excuse me. And I remember one night, I think I got in a fight with the girl I was seeing at the time, wicked toxic relationship, and he was busting out a pill to get high, and he asked me if I wanted some, and he usually did like every so often. I'm like, no, no, I don't do that. I don't do that. And then for this night, for whatever reason, I just did it, and it was like I had finally arrived. Like I just went completely numb, emotionally, spiritually. I just like, and I was like, oh, this is the answer, you know. And that's when I had to like get into that's when like it really took off for me is realizing that I was able to numb these emotions with a substance and feel okay, or so I thought at the time, feel okay.
Do you ever look back at that first time where you took that pill and kind of say, what if I didn't do it at that moment? How would things projected later on, or where would you be today? Do you ever look back at that as that being the big moment of a change? Or did you need that change to kind of really learn to get to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's almost both, if I'm being honest, because during the height of my addiction, because that led to you know alcoholism, and then I was an IV drug user. I was shooting heroin, cocaine, meth, crack. It just got very, very dark for me. I was living out of my car, and then totaled the car. Then I was under bridges, couch surfing. So it got very bad very quickly. And in those moments, you know, of like utter hopelessness, that's when you start thinking like, man, if I had never done that, and then you realize, like, statistically speaking, I shouldn't even be here. I overdosed twice. I got brought back. And statistically, for heroin addicts, the recovery rate is in the ground. And and I lost a lot of good people that like deserved to make it out that didn't. So when you're around that and people start dropping like flies, and then you somehow keep making it out, unbeknownst to your knowledge, you start realizing like there's a deeper meaning and there's like a purpose. And then when you start looking for that purpose, the dots start becoming connected. So once I started doing that, then I realized, okay, I needed to go through all that because I'm a vessel today in order to help people, like share my story, help others overcome their pain and their suffering the same way that I overcame mine. But it took a lot of work to get to that point. You know what I mean? A lot of removal of all the shit that I was using over, and It definitely wasn't an easy road, but the transformation and the growth that I've attained from going through that, it's not something that I regret today. I can say that confidently. Like, I don't think I would be as valuable today. I don't think I would be, as proud of myself, or as, and like, I wouldn't love myself the same way if had I not gone through all that. And it took a lot of time and acceptance to get to this point where I'm at today. But people ask me that all the time. Oh, well, what do you regret? And I don't have any, because I just have such a strong belief in, everything happening for a reason. And I'm very big on like conscience congruency, and listening to those internal notifications that you get inside from the universe that are guiding you either one way or another. And when you reach that level, there's almost like no mistakes, and there's no coincidences, and that's how I feel today.
You talked about the journey through the battles that you face, both drugs, alcohols, and everything. Was there a specific moment that was like the huge rock bottom that this needs to change? I need to get better because I'm putting maybe others at risk. I'm putting myself at risk, and I need to get better for the future me.
Yeah, so addiction's a funny thing, because you're so selfish and self-centered and egotistical, but everyone else around you gets the brunt of it.
Mhm.
Like, you think like you have it worse off, but you're dragging everybody through the mud during this addiction. And what people don't understand is coming to the conclusion that you need help is a long road. Like, everybody around me knew that I was fucked up long before I was even able to admit it. And that's where like true hopelessness is when people are calling you out, like, dude, you don't look good, like, you need help, and you're just in complete denial, like, just lying and lying. It's just like complete dishonest way of living. um that's scary, and looking back, like, those are the times that I was just like, wow. But I was just so stubborn, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, I can figure it out. Oh, I got this. And, it's just getting progressively worse and worse. And I used to always look at other people and compare myself, like, we do that as addicts, active addicts. We kind of compare ourselves. Like, when I wasn't using needles, I was like, well, at least I'm not using needles. But I was doing more drugs than that individual. I
Mhm.
just was doing them in a different way. But we kind of rationalize like that. Right. And then, like, when I work with other addicts, I always tell them, like, I always put a yet after it, because we tend to do that. We'll rationalize, say, well, I haven't lost my house, and I'll say yet. Well, I haven't overdosed, I'll say yet, because every yet that I had put into my life, like, was realized. Even death, like, I overdosed and got brought. So there was no more yets for me at that point. I had done them all, and that's where it was like really scary. And it took me like letting my guard down and just finally admitting, like, I don't know what I'm doing, because I had gone to, numerous rehabs and detoxes, and I tried cold turkey, and I tried switching drugs and switching alcohols and I tried everything under the sun, and it just wasn't working. And my pride just wouldn't let me, do it. And but I remember one time, so you know how they say when you hit rock bottom, that's when you turn your life around.
Yeah.
I hit rock bottom so many times, and it just kept like getting deeper and deeper. And so I get emotional when I think about this. So I was living with my cousin at the time, because I burned every other bridge. No one wanted me to stay with them. They didn't trust me not to steal from them, and they didn't want to walk into the bathroom to me overdosed. And it was like, it's messed up, dude. Like, the stuff that you put people through, like, you know what I mean? Like, your whole family like doesn't want you around because they don't want to be the one that finds you when you're dead. Like,
Yep.
that's deep, you know what I mean? Like, I had no one else. She gave me a shot, and I still, like, was getting high there, and I was walking out of rooms with blood dripping down my arm from shooting up. And her kids are seeing it, and it's like I was just a mess, and it wasn't, obviously it wasn't malicious. I was just sick. I was just a spiritually sickened individual, and I just needed help. And I ended up taking her husband's car to the store to get a pack of cigarettes. And on the way back, I nodded off and I hit a rock and popped a tire. And I ended up, it was like a mile from the house, but I rode it home on the rim, obviously, because I'm a knucklehead. And, she was obviously extremely upset. He was pissed. And we threw the spare on and we're driving to go get a new tire. And he was like, you know how they say when you hit rock bottom, that's when you'll change. And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I heard that. He's like, brother, stop digging. And I was like, what? And he's like, stop digging. You're there. You've been there for years. Stop digging. And I just started crying, and it was still like years after that before I got sober. But like, that's what I tell people. It's like, don't underestimate the power of planting a seed, because even though it took me like 3 more years to finally get sober, I'll never forget him saying that until the day I die. And every time I have a chance to speak about my addiction and things that, like, I always mention that, because it was just so powerful of a moment for me, even though it didn't like instantaneously change me. And like, it was just so powerful. Like, I'll never forget it. So that's definitely one of those moments for me.
Did that hurt the relationship between you and your family member, that moment? And how is it today? Have you guys grown from it? Have you been there for each other because of
Oh yeah, yeah. We've always been extremely close, and she's actually mentored me in a lot of areas in life, and she still remains, a mentor to me today. Um, she kind of grew up around that too, and understood that, she understood like the addict's point of it, so she was kind of more sympathetic to it, but also like, she was fed up too, because you can't, she kind of walked the line where, she always shot it to me straight, and then eventually there came a point where she was like, you got to go get help. Like, you can't, you, I'll drive you to a rehab or a detox or wherever you go, but you can't stay here anymore. And that was the story of my life. That was like the cycle, that no matter where I was at, I would just dry up the goods, and then until they told me I could leave, and then I'd find somewhere else to go, or I'd go to detox, and I'd, spin dry, and then I'd come out, and I'm already planning in detox how to use it, how to get high before I get home, and how to, you know what I mean? Like, the addict's mentality is, it's just the intelligence that addicts possess is like out of this world, and there's such a stigma on it. But the things that we go through, and the schemes that we create and manifest, and all the plots, that all the pieces that we put together, it's like an orchestrated phenomenon just to get, enough money to get high, or to get the possibility to use. It's crazy. And that's what I tell addicts. Like, if you guys can channel that into a positive direction, like I have today, like, you're unstoppable, because it's the same dedication, just with a different purpose.
yeah. I was gonna say that how you're talking about like the mentality of an addict, it's like taking those same skills or that mindset, but changing it into a positive direction. They're gonna be able to thrive in any situation or anywhere they go, both career and personally, because they've been through that mindset in a bad time. And if they
Mhm.
take it and reverse it going to positive, they're not golden, but they're able to go even higher and to excel expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. And it's a three-part like disease, I think it's a spiritual disease, is what it is. And the way out of that is finding, and deepening your spirituality. But like, it's mind, body, and spirit. So like, the mind is the craving. That's when, like, I wasn't using, but I kept obsessing about the next time that I was going to use. And then the body is like the compulsion. That's the, when you hear one is too many, a thousand's never enough, or once I start, I can't stop, that's referring to the compulsion part of the disease in the body. And then the spirit part is like the restlessness, the irritability, the discontentedness. Like you're just always, if you're at home, you want to be at work. If you're at work, you want to be over here. If you never feel comfortable in your own skin. So, there's a program in place to kind of fix all of that and render you from the hopelessness that you live in an active addiction.
You talked about going into sobriety a few years after the incident with your cousin's car. What challenged you during the time of sobriety, and how do you think that's made you who you are today?
Um, I don't see, it's tough because when you live the way that I lived and then you have the life that I have today, especially like not statistically supposed to be here, like this is all a bonus. And I am human and I do get, you know, stressed out and like I still go through the human emotions, but like that's one thing that I always check myself on. And it's like this is a bonus round. Like you have a purpose today. And that's something that I didn't understand before.
Mhm.
I didn't understand. I was lacking purpose, and then everything everything was a challenge to me because I was either making it a challenge or I was just attracting, you know, so much hardship and negativity through my daily habits. It was impossible for me not to attract more to me. So I always looked at that like I was just dealt a bad hand of cards, or nothing's ever goes my way. And now I just look at challenges as opportunities. It's an opportunity to rise above. It's an opportunity to deepen my spirituality. It's an opportunity to, you know, for change. It's an opportunity for growth. I just try and look at everything as an opportunity today. But one thing that was kind of tested it was my meme and my uncle passed away within a year of each other. I think it was like 6 or 8 months, when I was like I wanna say I just celebrated, like, my first year, or it was in my first year of sobriety, and that was the first 2 losses that I've dealt with sober. Because when I was in prison, my first 30 days in prison, my aunt passed away, and then the following year, my grandfather passed away. Um, but I was using in prison, so I was still getting high here and there, and I was still so I never. And plus, I wasn't doing any work on myself in prison. I was kind of just like waiting to get out and pick up where I started, and that was, but again, that was it's all part of my process. But yeah, I would say mourning and grieving those two deaths were the biggest challenge for me so far.
Do you feel that prison, you talked about how you kept living the life that you were even in prison. Were you shocked that there was no wake up call for you in prison? Like it didn't kind of like you see the shows like Beyond Scare Straight or 90 Days In and things like that, where you hear the stories, but people actually are wanting to change because of going in there and they don't want to be there anymore. Did you not have that? Or it was like, I'm just doing what I need to just survive?
Um, well, I feel like growing up the way that I did with what I went through, I learned to kind of like chameleonize, and
Okay.
because I never really knew who I was, so I was able to kind of like form and adapt, you know, mend and bend my personality to fit, But before going into prison, because I almost killed somebody, I drifted over the line and hit somebody head on. They had to get med flighted and everything. Thank God it was all right with them, but she was at my sentencing. She was a mess. I was a mess. My mother and my cousin were there. Everybody was bawling their eyes out. It was like, and I was living it up. before I went to prison. I was drinking, getting high every day. It was like a going away party for like the last 2 months before I went to prison. Like I was celebrating this shit. Like, but that's how I lived. That was the ego that I had. It was like, oh, this is just, well, whatever. I'm going to prison. Like nothing really sunk in. I never really dealt with consequences. I just didn't look at them as like
Mhm.
anything to fear or worry about, or and that's what made me so dangerous in that aspect, is because like I didn't fear consequence. There was no fear there. So there was no limit to what I would do or how far I would go. But so the ride to prison from the courtroom after experiencing all that emotion and everything, that was like, man, fuck. Like I really did it this time. And then you get into prison, and then you're around a bunch of people just like doing the same shit you're doing. It's just like that chameleon came back, and it was just like, oh, and then like I always said, like, I lived good in prison, like I got along with everybody. It was like, but you also have to like make the most of it too, as far as like accepting like you're going to be there for a while. I do wish that I had done more work on myself while I was in there. But it just wasn't the time. But it's just something I just kind of like fell into. Like there were people in there doing their thing. Like I still talk to one of them today. He's a good friend of mine. But he was just like, he was always like writing songs, playing on the guitar. He was working out. He was meditating. He was just like deep diving into spiritual development. He was like, when I get out, I'm going to record an album. And he got out and recorded an album. So like there were people in there that were able to do it. I don't want people to get misunderstood. Like I just chose not to. It's like I just went with the easy route and fell in the groove of things.
You talk about wishing that you did work on yourself, but now currently you do make a difference and work on yourself, and fitness plays a big part of that. What's been the big motivation for you when it comes to your journey with health and fitness?
So the way that I look at it, right, is I'm truly grateful for the life that I live today. I'm grateful for this vessel that I inhabit, like the human body. I'm grateful for the people in my life. Um, but gratitude is action. So, in order to prove and show that I'm truly grateful for this vessel that I inhabit, I take care of it and I maximize it to its potential. In order to prove that I'm grateful for my family and the people in my life, I show up day in and day out as an example that they could follow, and I lead them in the right direction to be the best them by being my best me. Um, I'm grateful for this life that I live because I use my hardships that I went through and turn around and help others to overcome theirs. So gratitude is action. So, and most people, it starts with health and fitness because let's face it, that's the one thing you have control over. You can control what you consume and you can control what you do throughout the day. So if you're eating the right amount, of macronutrients and you have a daily habit or daily habits that set you up for success every day, then that's where you're going to succeed. And then the discipline and the focus and the consistency and the hard work and the delayed gratification and all the stuff that dieting and working out teaches you, those things, those traits are applicable in business, in family, in life in general. But it starts with you. So like I always like to bring the clients on and have them create the individual that they admire in all ways. So, what do they look like? What do they feel like? What kind of energy do they carry and transmit to others? And from there, we just start constructing that individual through, you know, small steps and small choices, even the insignificant ones, because those are the ones that matter.
When you're getting a client, what are they really connecting with you on? As there's so many coaches out there, what's been drawing them to you personally?
I think it's just the realness of the content. I'm very like up in your face and raw. And I just tell it like it is. Like I love ain't lies. So if I see somebody that's fucking up, I'm gonna tell them, if they're doing something that's not in line with, who they should be, or where they're trying to go, I'm gonna call them out on it. I believe in compression over compassion. And a lot of people, they're like, "Oh man, Craig's really an asshole." And it's like, but I have to be. And the reason why I have to be is that's what helped me. Like when people started being raw with me instead of
Mhm.
like consoling me and comforting me and, oh, you're trying your best. And you like when people were in my face, like, your best isn't working. Now it's time to do what's required. Whatever the fuck that is, that's what you need to do. So you need to find another level, you need to dig deeper, and you need to get the shit done. Like when people started connecting with me on that level, that's when I was like, oh, this is it. Like the coddling shit never worked for me because it just keeps you stuck. It makes you feel like, oh, it's okay where you're at, and it's you hear all the time, it's your genetics, or it's where we grew up, or it's where we, and it's all bullshit to me, if I'm being honest. And the reason why is because I've lived in both both ways. I've had the compassion and the coddling, and I've had the compression, and now I'm able to self compress. And when I back myself into a corner purposefully, like that's when the dog comes out and I'm able to overcome the adversity. So having that like mastering self to that level of degree is something that is like it's totally beneficial if you're trying to like really max out this life that we live in all areas. And that may look different for every individual, you know what I mean? My max out standard is going to be different than yours. And Tom, Dick, and Harry might have, you know different ideas of what the potential for their life is going to be. My job is to just kind of raise people from this mediocrity standard that seems to be so common today, and be like there's more to this. There's more out of life. And it's not even, it's just like the feeling that you're able to possess when you live a purpose driven life.
You talked about being real with people, and I think that's the time where people really to see how much grit they have in them. Where if they're able to push themselves to the next level, where you have that coach where it's keeping them on that same level and they don't want to really push them. And I would hate that. I mean, I'm a person that I'm going to tell it how it is, and I'm going to push you to become the greatest version of yourself. I want that person to do the same thing to me because
Hmm.
I want to get better. And I always see that as a positive because a lot of people do the bare minimum and they can go to that next level. They just haven't been pushed to get to that next level. And it sounds like you're really doing that with your clients, is really pushing them to that next level that you know that they can get to.
Yeah. Yeah, and they understand that I live it. Like this blueprint that I teach is like what I need in order to survive and to thrive the way that I do on a daily basis. And I document everything, like, so these people know that I live it and I really do this. And I feel like that's something that a lot of coaches excuse me, struggle with. Um I talk about it all the time. Like, I want somebody who has the results, like who I know is living it, because knowledge to me is useless without an application. Like I get a chuckle out of these personal trainers in the gym where the only way you can distinguish him and the client is he's wearing a shirt that says trainer. Like to me, it's just like, okay, maybe you have the knowledge, but you're not applying it
Mhm.
for yourself. You know what I mean? I believe like as a coach, you have to look the part and you have to live the part. It's not about, because people connect with you on a deeper level like that because they're like, this motherfucker really does this shit. Like he doesn't miss. He's
Yep.
up at 1:30 every morning. So when I tell them you need to get up at this time to do this, they're not gonna be like, oh, well, you don't do that. They know I do it because I show that. And I feel like like those are the people that helped me get to where I'm at today, were the ones that I knew lived it, you know,
Yep.
because I've been through that whole, like I said, the rehabs and the detoxes, and they always try and tell you like these little, tricks or tips of how to not pick up the first drink of drug. But when you're that hopeless addict like I was, and that hopeless alcoholic, that's like bottom of the pit. Again, we don't think about consequences, and we're not able to play the tape out, as they say. It's like, well, if I get high, then this is going to happen. This person's going to be upset. I might lose my job. I might do, like that's playing the tape out. We don't do that. It's just like I need to get this fix. So when I would go to rehabs and people are telling me this to play the tape out and take some deep breaths and I was like one lady was telling me that this therapist and I was like, "Can I ask you something?" I was like, "Do you drink?" And she was like, "Yeah, I have a glass of wine at dinner with my husband. Sometimes, on the weekends we have a couple beers." I'm like, "What the fuck could you tell me about not drinking when you still drink?" Which is one of these people that went to school for addiction and got a license, which is, she's doing her part to give back. But like somebody like me, like if you haven't lived it, if you haven't like gotten to the point where you're sticking a needle in your arm against your will, like when you're getting high against your will and you still can't stop, like I need someone who's been there and who came out of it, not someone who studied what the addiction does to the brain and gives me a little color chart to follow when I want to get high, because it's not going to work for me. It may work for some people. I'm not going to discredit it entirely, but I'm saying for my experience and what I needed somebody who went through the fucking gutter and walked through hell and came out the other side. And when I found that person and they were able, like they related to me on an emotional level, and that's something that I carried on like into my coaching is I relate to people on an emotional level because it's honest, it's valid, and it's about the connection.
With fitness playing such a big part in your life, do you have a fitness goal that you're looking towards, a competition, an athletic event, something that's exciting for you? Or do you feel that your goal is how far you're pushing yourself?
Yeah, I feel like it's the feeling that I get through doing the work is the result that I chase every day. Because I'm a firm believer in the man that takes more pride in the steps that it takes to achieve the result is always going to go further
Mhm.
than someone who just likes the destination of the result. And I tell people all the time, like, because they come in, "Oh, I just want a six pack," and "Oh, I just want to lose 10 to 15 pounds." And then I get them on the program and I get them to that goal. But the way that I do it, like, it's total transformation of mind, body, and spirit. So it may start off superficial, where it's like, I just want to look like this and I just want to look, but like through the work, they deepen the understanding of themselves and they get to a place where like, I just want to amplify this like as much as I can. And then you chase the feeling that it brings you. Like that's what people don't understand. It's like when they don't prioritize the personal development, like nothing else matters to me. Like I can't be the husband that my wife deserves if I'm not the best me. I can't be the best father to my kids if I'm not the best me. Like when I was getting sober, I would say like, "Oh, I'm, I'm giving it everything I have," and they're like, my mentor was like, "You think it's possible you're leaving love on the table?" And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And he's like, "You can't exceed love past the point that you love yourself.
Mhm.
So if you only love yourself at 60%, that's all you're giving your wife. That's all you're giving your kids. So you may feel like you're giving, them your all, but if you got 40% in the tank, like you're leaving love on the table." And I was just like, it just blew my mind. And I was like, damn, like it really does start, with me, and in doing that, my wife got into a personal development journey. My kids work out and they care about their health and their fitness and it's a beautiful thing and it's like but it just takes one person, you know what I mean? And the, the snowball effect that it has, it's like the shit's contagious. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like when you see somebody glowing and leveling up and just loving life and not missing and they're just completely dedicated to being the best version of themselves every day, that motivates the shit out of people, especially if you're like as close as my family is, we all live under the same roof and I like to think of us as like a machine, and in order for all the machines to be like parts of the machine to be functioning properly and be as efficient as we can as a machine, we all have to be on the same page, going in the same direction. So that's something that I always tell people too, like just be a leader. You know what I mean? Like you can't, especially parents, like you can't teach your kids, to be healthy and take care of their body if you're overweight, lazy, and you're not, you haven't acquired that for yourself. Like kids pick up on that shit, you know what I mean? And it's like when like because I picked up on it. I had family members tell, oh, don't drink, don't, and they have a beer in their hand, they're ready to fall off a bar stool. Like they were telling me, you know, good advice, like stay away from the bottle. But it's like it doesn't resonate like that because you're looking at them like that. You know what I mean? It's like you have a problem with the bottle. Like why are you telling me? And I guess it could go both ways, but I just feel like the best chance you have at making an impact is by being the example that you need, like that you needed and that you need to this day, and then that the people who follow you also need.
And it's crazy because kids are smarter than what people think that they
100%.
They are always paying attention. And it's kind of like, even if you look at animals, and kids are the same way, they will remember certain traits or characteristics or things that are happening. And they just, anytime that situation comes up, they say something or they act in a certain way because they live by example. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to follow it. Like a kid's going to do exactly what their dad does because their dad did it or their mom did it. So you are totally right with that, where if you are leading by example, it's going to help them when they're older and they're going to do the same thing to lead by example for their kids when they're older.
Yeah, and you're setting a path like with action. So it's not just words, and it's not just you saying, "Well, when I was your age," like you're living it, and they know you're living it because they see it. So it's just a lot more impactful, and it holds a lot more weight when the actions are backing up the words. Because most of the time when you have action, you don't really need to say many words because the actions speak. The results speak, and that's what I try and get people to understand is if you're there's nothing more consistent, no more common in this world than a consistent person with no results. So I see it all the time. There's people in the gym 6 7 days a week and they don't look like they work out. And not to go the superficial route, but for the topic that we're saying, like leading by example, what you're doing is you're showing your kids that you can work hard and consistently do something and not get any results. That's discouraging. Like when they look at, and even for your own well-being, like there's nothing worse than trying to talk fitness with somebody and then being like, oh, I didn't know you worked out. You know what I mean? Like there's something to be said with somebody who gets the results, because when you're in great shape, like regardless of, we're just talking off first impressions here. Somebody walks in the room is in great shape. Everybody notices them. They have a certain confidence about themselves. They have a certain level of self-love. They have, like, the confidence emanates throughout the room. That they're hardworking. They're disciplined. They're consistent. They value themselves. Like all of these traits, just by looking at an individual who's in shape. And I'm not saying there's no assholes out there that are in great shape, but they're just an asshole. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying off first impression, right? When somebody walks in the room and you can tell that they care about their body and all the traits that they possess through getting that done, it's evident and it's undeniable. You know what I mean? So it's like, now flip it to somebody who's the opposite. Like think about the self-love you would have. Think about the self-confidence you would have. Think about the validation that you would have. Like that's the thing. Like my daily structured habits are set up to continuously validate me and my confidence and my self-love, like, because the work instills the worth. And that's one thing that nobody could ever take from me is my level of self-worth, because I invest that into myself every single day, and I validate myself through my actions, and my habits are always aligned with the outcome that I desire for my life. Outcome changes, but my habits always follow it. You know what I mean? Like, to live with change, you need principles that don't, and you need habits that are always aligned with the outcome that you desire. And I think that's where people get it messed up. And that's where I got it messed up, is my habits were not in line with the outcome that I wanted. I wanted, sobriety and success and this and that, but my habits were going the complete other direction,
Something when learning a little bit more about you through social media, I found something out that you talked about a little bit earlier about how someone you met in prison created music. You had a passion with music and were writing. How did that come about? And was this something that you always knew you were wanting to do?
Yeah. I mean, that was something like, my mom jokes like that. I came out of the womb singing, and that was just something that I was always like drawn to. And even like before I was 2, I was like, singing in the car seat. Like, all my aunts and my parents, they all like bring up memories and stuff like that. And then like back then, like CMT was big, like for the country, and like the music videos, like they played them all, like the rock videos, like
Mhm.
the Bon Jovi and Poison, the hair metal bands. My father was into all of them, and then my mother was into the country. So like when I grew up, it was like Garth Brooks just hit the scene. I like idolized him as a musician. Travis Tritt, like all those guys, and I was just always drawn to that. And that was like a way of self-expression, I guess. Like in my teen years, I would write a lot of music. I'd do like poetry, and then I'd write raps, and then I'd write like singer songwriter stuff. And that was always, I just loved the form of expression through that, and also like the healing capabilities of music. Because I remember, like, when I was struggling and going through my shit, there was always like a certain artist that I could play, and it
Yep.
would kind of alleviate, or a certain song that could take me back, or before a basketball game, a certain song would get me hyped up and in the zone. Like, that music just has that power, and that was something I always admired about it.
Do you feel that another song will be coming soon? Do you feel that you could write another one right now?
um I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a big part of my life still. But as far as like my own career, it's just right now it's not something that I'm working towards. But I mean, I would like to record again for sure. It's just not something that I'm pushing as hard as I was before.
You're just now just enjoying karaoke night on the weekends.
Yeah.
When you're not working, something our listeners like to learn more about our guests is what do you like doing for fun? When you're not in the gym, when you're not working, what do you like to do?
So honestly, man, I love like going on walks. Like, I like when wife and the kids and the dog, and we'll go, do a couple trails that we have here in New Hampshire. There's like parks set up with a bunch of trails that you can walk through. I love doing that. I just love connecting with nature. Um, and then obviously like working out, anything that deepens my personal development. I love doing. I love helping others. That's something that gives me a sense of purpose too. And just I just love being around the family, to be honest with you, because having a steady 40-hour job, and then having 2 businesses, and being the provider for your wife and kids. It's one of those things, like, if they have your time, we don't have the money, and then
Mhm.
if we have the money, they don't have your time. So it's always a constant struggle of trying to navigate that perfectly, you know what I mean? So I just really value um the time when we're all able to, spend together, no matter what, whether that's going swimming at our family members or going to the beach or going on vacation or going, or even if it's just hanging out in the backyard, just, because we do that sometimes. Like on a Sunday, we'll just like lay out a couple towels and we'll just tan and we'll just sit there and talk. Like that's something that I like hold very, very dear to in my heart. It's just that, we're just laying there in the sun. But like to me, it's like that's the time that I get to connect with them after, constantly being on the move and working and, pushing this and closing this client and, setting up this client. It's just like, I gotta like I found more gratitude for little things, and I feel like that's helped me tremendously.
The final question I'll ask you, for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
So the biggest thing is it all starts in the mind. So you're never going to exceed your own level of personal development, and you will never outperform your current self-image. So until you raise the standard for yourself and what you think you're worth, you're always going to be at that same level, and you'll never be able to overcome anything. Also, the fastest way to get what you want is to find somebody who already has it and have them teach you how to do it. A lot of times this is going to cost an investment, but the way that I looked at it, right, is all the money that I've spent on coaches and mentors and personal development and sobriety and everything like that. Like there was no penny wasted, because I never looked at it like, oh, I'm putting money in their pocket. Like I'm putting money into me. Like I'm reaping all the rewards of this financial spend, and the stuff that was poured into me, Alex, I can't put a price tag on, and that's what I'm trying to do now for others, is time, kind of like time collapse for them, like instead of beating their head against the wall like I did and just being stubborn and ego driven and, oh, I just want to do it on my own. I just want to do it on my, and it's just like the best thing to do is get to the results, because what that's going to do for your level of confidence and your experience and everything like that, it's tremendous when you finally get there. Because what happens to me and a lot of other people, it's very common, is when you're like trying things over and over and over again, like discouragement sets in, because we're humans, you know what I mean? And then that inner critic starts talking, and it's like, see, I told you you couldn't do this.
Mm.
I told you you could, so when you have somebody who's already doing what you want to do, and you're like, hey, let me know how much it's going to be, tell me what I need to do, you're going to get there. And then once you get there, now you're like, okay, what's next on the list? Because you shorten the time of struggle and heartache and aggravation, because you got to the result already. Now, like your confidence is boosted. You can check that off the list. Now you have more free time to tackle the next endeavor. I spent over a decade trying to get sober and trying to do all of these things, like over a decade, because I just didn't want to admit that I didn't know the way out. And I don't want people to go through that, because I was in a very dark place and I didn't trust myself for a very long time, because I had no self-confidence. Every promise I made to myself, I broke. And that is so detrimental to your mental health, because when your subconscious mind can't trust what you say you're going to do, because time and time again you never do it, like that's when self sabotage takes over, and it's just a motherfucker to get out of.
Well, Craig, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here. Appreciate it.